August 12, 2000. Beneath the cold gray waters of the Barents Sea, the Russian Navy's prized submarine K-141 Kursk begins a routine training exercise, part of the largest post-Soviet naval drills the country had attempted in over a decade. At 11:28 a.m., a sudden explosion rips through the vessel's bow. Just over 2 minutes later, a second, far more violent blast occurs, registering 3.5 on the Richter scale, detected by seismic monitoring stations across Europe and as far as Alaska, including those in the UK. 118 sailors are trapped in total darkness, sealed within the shattered hull of a sunken submarine. Freezing water rises around them. Oxygen is dwindling. Hope is slipping away. Above the surface, Russian officials insist they have the situation under control, rejecting foreign offers of help, even as precious hours turn into days. By the time international rescue teams are finally allowed in, it's far too late. This is the story of the Kursk, a submarine built for war, lost in peacetime. A disaster not only caused by a devastating explosion, but made far worse by silence, bureaucracy, and national pride. A tragedy that didn't have to end the way it did. Commissioned in 1994, the K-141 Kursk was one of the most formidable submarines in the Russian fleet. At 155 meters long and weighing over 16,000 tons submerged, she belonged to the Oscar II class, nuclear-powered cruise missile submarines, built during the Cold War with a singular purpose: to hunt and destroy American aircraft carrier groups. Armed with 24 P-700 Granite missiles, each capable of flying at Mach 2.5 and carrying either conventional or nuclear warheads, the Kursk was a floating arsenal, powered by two OK-650 nuclear reactors that gave her virtually unlimited range. She was hailed as a marvel of Russian engineering, a vessel so powerful and well-armored that many in the Navy called her unsinkable. But that reputation masked a darker reality. In the years following the Soviet Union's collapse, the Russian Navy had fallen into quiet decay. Funding was slashed, training was irregular, and critical maintenance was often postponed or ignored. Officers now sailed Cold War-era vessels with shrinking resources and aging parts, and few dared admit how fragile their fleet had become. The Kursk may have looked invincible on paper, but behind her hardened steel, she represented a navy and a nation struggling to maintain the illusion of strength. A weapon built for global war, sailing into peacetime with systems no longer as reliable as they once seemed. August 12, 2000. It was a crisp Saturday morning in the Barents Sea. The Kursk, Russia's largest and most heavily armed attack submarine, slipped beneath the waves to participate in the Northern Fleet's first major naval exercise in over a decade. She carried 118 crew members, elite submariners, engineers, and officers, and was loaded with a full payload of torpedoes, including the Type 6576A kit torpedo, a 10-meter-long heavyweight weapon fueled by high test peroxide, a compound known for its volatility. At 11:28 a.m., one of those torpedoes malfunctioned while still in its launch tube, triggering a catastrophic hydrogen peroxide explosion in the forward compartment. The blast killed or incapacitated most of the crew in the first two compartments and caused the Kursk to list and descend toward the seabed. Just 135 seconds later, at 11:31 a.m., a second, far larger explosion, caused by the detonation of additional torpedoes ignited by the fire, ripped through the forward hull with an estimated force of 3 to 7 tons of TNT. The seismic shock waves were so powerful, they were picked up by monitoring stations as far away as Alaska, the UK, and across Scandinavia. The submarine slammed into the seafloor at a depth of 108 meters, embedding itself at a downward angle. Inside, 23 men survived the initial blasts, retreating to compartment 9 at the rear of the vessel. In the pitch black, the air grew thin, temperatures plunged, and rising water began to fill the space. One sailor, Lieutenant Captain Dmitry Kolesnikov, documented the names of the survivors on a piece of paper, a silent message in the dark, unaware that their fate was already being sealed, not just by metal, but by Moscow's refusal to act swiftly. August 12, 2000. The Russian Navy loses contact with the Kursk. At first, there's calm denial, a routine glitch, they assume, not unusual during naval exercises. But when the Kursk fails to check in by nightfall, quiet concern turns to dread. By morning, search ships scour the Barents Sea. Sonar finally detects a metallic echo, a submarine 108 meters down, bow buried in the seabed. It's the Kursk. On board the Pyotr Veliki, the Northern Fleet's flagship, officers begin to realize the scale of the disaster. A massive internal explosion. And then, silence. But faint, rhythmic banging sounds rise from the wreck. Survivors, trapped, still alive. A frantic rescue effort begins. But time and technology are not on Russia's side. The deep-sea submersibles won't lock onto the escape hatch. Visibility is near zero. Currents batter the recovery crews. Equipment is outdated and unreliable. Desperation mounts. And yet Moscow hesitates. Seismic stations in Norway and across the West had already detected 2 underwater explosions, evidence of a major disaster beneath the Barents Sea. Within hours, both Britain and Norway offer immediate assistance. They have the tools, modern deep-sea submersibles, trained rescue crews, and the experience to reach the wreck in time. But the Kremlin declines. Accepting help would mean exposing the degraded state of Russia's naval technology to foreign eyes. It would mean admitting that one of their most advanced submarines, a symbol of post-Soviet strength, had failed. So the offers are shelved. Days pass. It isn't until August 20th, 8 days after Kursk sank, that Russia finally agrees to outside help. The Norwegians descend first, but by then, the hull is cold. The ocean is silent. There are no more knocks from within. Help had finally come, but far too late. By the time Norwegian divers reached the stricken submarine on August 20th, 2000, it was too late. The men inside had perished, some instantly, others slowly over the course of days. But the world still demanded answers. How could a seemingly indestructible nuclear submarine suffer such a catastrophic failure during a peacetime exercise? To uncover the truth, the Russians needed the wreck, but raising the Kursk was no small task. The submarine was massive, nearly 2 football fields long, weighing more than 18,000 tons and lying 108 meters beneath the Barents Sea. Its bow had been obliterated in the explosion. The rest of the hull, though intact, was partially embedded in the seafloor silt. Russia lacked the technology to retrieve it alone. So in 2001, the Kremlin contracted a Dutch consortium, Mammoet and Smit International, to lift the Kursk in what would become the most expensive and ambitious salvage operation of its time, costing over $65 million. The recovery team faced enormous technical and political challenges. They would first need to cut off the destroyed bow section, not only because it was too damaged to lift, but because it likely contained sensitive military hardware and munitions. Some even suspected it held classified weapon systems the Kremlin didn't want foreign eyes to see. Over the course of weeks, remote-operated vehicles, ROVs, and divers worked in the freezing dark to cut the Kursk into 2 sections. High-pressure water jets were first used to clear silt and debris and to create access points for divers and equipment. Then, to safely separate the destroyed bow, which was too damaged and dangerous to recover, a tungsten carbide-studded cutting wire was looped around the hull. Operated from the surface, it sliced cleanly through the thick steel. The work was extremely hazardous. The bow contained unexploded torpedoes and possibly classified systems, making every moment a potential catastrophe. Once the bow was severed, workers drilled 26 holes into the remaining hull, allowing steel lifting cables to be fed through. These cables were attached to a giant barge called the Giant 4, custom-built with a hydraulic lifting frame. On October 8, 2001, more than a year after the tragedy, the raising began. Slowly, with millimeter precision, the Kursk was lifted off the seabed. emerging from the dark after 14 months underwater. It was then towed to Roslyakovo dry dock near Murmansk, where the investigation could begin in earnest. Inside the wreck, remains of 115 of the 118 crewmen were recovered and eventually returned to their families for burial. But the questions remained. What had really happened? And why had Russia waited so long to accept help? In the aftermath of the salvage, Russia launched an official investigation into the Kursk disaster. But from the beginning, it was marred by secrecy, conflicting narratives, and public distrust. The Navy's initial claim that Kursk had collided with a foreign submarine was swiftly dismissed by Western analysts and even Russian experts. The real cause, revealed only after intense pressure, was internal. A leak of volatile hydrogen peroxide fuel from an aging torpedo had triggered a catastrophic explosion in the forward compartment. A second, far larger explosion followed 135 seconds later, likely from a chain reaction of torpedoes detonating inside the bow. This blast sealed the submarine's fate, rupturing several compartments and killing most of the crew instantly. But what outraged the Russian public wasn't just the disaster, it was the cover-up. The Kremlin delayed informing the public, refused foreign assistance for days, and fed misleading updates to the families. President Putin, who remained on vacation during the initial crisis, was widely condemned for his slow and dismissive response. Some families were allegedly paid to stay silent. Others protested on national TV, only to be silenced. In one shocking moment, a grieving mother shouted at officials during a televised meeting and was sedated on live television. By the time the full truth emerged, it was too late. The Kursk had become a grim national symbol, not only of technological failure, but of the institutional decay within post-Soviet Russia's military and leadership. In a world where truth is buried deeper than any wreck, we bring it to the surface. Join us and subscribe to help the channel grow. Never let history sink unheard and keep these unforgotten voices alive. Thank you for watching.